Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez, and I actually just had two book signings for this little thing, Off the Rails. It's actually just a book based on my experience traveling and pretty much on the train going from San Diego up to, well, I ended up in Oakland, but I didn't take it all the way. I got off in San Jose. And just little things I learned along the way. Hopefully, if you are trying to support the channel, consider buying it, and that way I can continue doing this. Uh, but today I'm actually going to talk about something that some of you may really be interested in. And I love the Marvel movies and TV shows. And I ended up watching the second season of Daredevil, which had the Punisher. Now the Punisher version in Netflix, I thought was really nice. I thought it was really interesting. But I did find some mistakes. And I don't mean mistakes based on the original work, but rather mistakes based on clinical anatomy and clinical science. And so with that, I'm going to show you a little bit on, and I'm going to use my book, Human Anatomy and Clinical Approach. And just for those of you who are interested, I am going to start getting my, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to record some of my lectures from class and show you how you can work with these books if you're interested to learn anatomy on your own. So hopefully that's something that you guys will appreciate and be able to use, and I'll be able to sell my lab manuals to you. And I'm looking on my book here. You actually have a picture of the skull. You can find it if you have the book. It's on the axial skeletal system. And if you look closely, I'm going to draw this in here. You have the sphenoid bone here and the frontal bone right in front of it. Temporal bone, frontal bone, and the sphenoid bone is that little thing right here, which I'm coating with brown. So supposedly the bullet in the Punisher went through the sphenoid and the frontal bone. So this area here. X marks the spot. So this area right here where these lines come together. It's actually an area which is known to do a lot of different things. Now, one of the things is, that is an area, and they actually do show you a picture of where it would be on a skull, so the bullet's lodged in there. And it says it did damage to the frontal and temporal lobe, which, if it went to the sphenoid, just again, looking in here, the lobe of the brains are the brain here, inside here you have the frontal, parietal, and the temporal lobe here. And so it could hit the frontal or temporal bones if it went to the phenofrontal suture. Now, the area is involved in a lot of things, and so damage to the right frontal lobe and right temporal lobe can end up doing a lot of things. So for instance, right frontal lobe is involved in problem solving, spontaneity, memory, language, initiation, judgment, impulse control, social and sexual behavior. So damage to that frontal lobe could potentially cause a lack of control, impulse control. So that is one of the things that can happen is, yes, could a damage to that area of the brain cause some sort of problems with impulse control? Could the Punisher have actually done this stuff because of that? And the answer is yes. Now, what about the temporal lobe? The temporal lobe, it says it causes alterations in personality. And so that's actually one of the big things is that, yes, it can change its personality, and so those areas are really nicely chosen for a little bit until I get back to it. Now, here's the interesting thing. Just by having head trauma alone, it actually seems that there is a change in the personality and in some sort of impulse control. Well, one of the things they find is brain trauma is actually 7 times more common in prison populations than in the normal populations. If you have head trauma, if you have someone in prison, they're more likely to have head trauma than people who are not in prison. 7 times more likely. And so maybe there is something to the head trauma causing this in someone like the Punisher. Now, the problem they made is the doctor they have mentions that the Punisher suffers from sympathetic storming. And this was the one that really got me because I was like, wait a minute, I remember that from med school. Sympathetic storming can actually occurs within 24 hours of severe brain trauma, and actually can continue for up to a week. Or the other person that can get it, besides severe brain trauma, are people who are actually in a glaucoma scale of 3 to 8, which means that this is a person who is technically unresponsive in most cases. Now, the fact that the Punisher is responsive removes the idea of sympathetic storming. Also, the brain trauma, the person is not necessarily alive, and what's happening is the sympathetic system is going on overdrive. So, the idea that a brain head trauma could actually cause a change in personality is possible. But the sympathetic storming that they added is wrong. They should have actually gotten an expert. They can contact me if they're looking in particular. But it's just one of the things that, writers probably didn't know. They read sympathetic storming. Oh, who's going to realize about this? Who's going to think about this? I mean, it's not like there's some crazy anatomy professor who's watching Marvel movies looking for errors. I don't look for errors. I just find them. Now, if you're really interested in how brain damage causes changes in the brain, you should consider the case of Phineas P. Cage. Now, that's actually, they mention it in every psychology class, every neuro class, because what happened is, this gentleman, he was working on railways, and the railway spike went through his head, came out the other egg, and his friends, his personality changed. It changed so much that his friends no longer saw him as the Phineas Cage that was their friends. They actually said he was no longer the Cage they knew due to his personality changes. And it seems like and this is actually one of the things, they said that in Punisher that the bullet went to the right side. Phineas Cage, the one that we usually base our understanding, had damage to the left side. His left lobe was the one that was affected. And so they may have actually made a mistake on the lobe. I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, any questions I will do. And I'll stop talking. Again, if you're like what's on this channel and want to support me, consider getting off the rails. And if you really like the book, please give a review on it. If you don't, go ahead and write a review if you want. It's, maybe helps too. Thank you and have a good night.